Hi everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. So this week we are going to be speaking about Sylviajermitsen. She is connected to, actually we mentioned her briefly in the Charles Manson podcast we did a couple of months ago. We're going to get into her story today. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all the new subscribers, all the new people that joined our Facebook group, and all the new followers on Instagram. Thank you so much. We're growing pretty good.
It seems to be going pretty well. We're glad people are interested, and we're going to keep putting out content for people to enjoy.
Yeah, we're going to keep trying to build the subscribers. As soon as we can get to 500 subscribers, we're going to be able to do some live streams. So that'll be really fun. So please like and share our YouTube channel.
So Reet Jurvetson was born September the 23rd, 1950 in Sweden to Estonian refugees. She grew up at 4545 Royal Ave in Montreal's West End NDG district. She was a free spirit, full of life. She was adventurous, artistic, and she liked to sew her own clothes, which that's pretty motivated to be able to do that, especially at a young age.
Yeah, she sounds like she was an awesome person.
She probably would have been a lot of fun. She dreamed of going to California, and she was thinking about hitchhiking there, which was common for young people at the time.
Yeah, we were just talking about hitchhiking in the last podcast.
Yeah. She went to Toronto, where she stayed with her grandmother while she was modeling part-time, and she was working at the post office. Eventually, she saved enough money to fly to LA, where she stayed with her boyfriend, Jean, French fella. She had met him in a cafe in Montreal. Reet was attracted to Jean because he very closely resembled Jim Morrison of The Doors, so a very popular male figure at the time.
Yeah, and she was just crazy about him. I mean, she liked him as a person, but just she brought up that fact a lot, that he looked so much like Jim Morrison. And I guess Jim Morrison was the man back then.
Yeah. Jean and Reet lived together in LA at 5311 Melrose Avenue, apartment 306 of the Paramount Hotel, with another Montrealer also named Jean.
Yeah, there's a few Jeans involved in this case, but that's welcome to Montreal.
Yeah. So a few weeks later, her best friend, Gilda Green, she got a postcard from Jefferson saying that she was happy. And that would be the last time Gilda would ever hear from Reet.
Yeah, and that was her very, very best friend. They were super duper close, kept in touch all the time. So for her best friend not to hear from her that's bad sign.
In a postcard dated October 31st, 1969, which was sent to her parents from LA, said, "Dear Mom and Dad, the weather is nice. I go frequently to the beach." So that would imply she's having a good time out there and everything's fine. So her family never had a doubt in their mind of any reason to suspect anything sinister or that anything was wrong at the time.
Now, was it in the days without cell phones? So, I mean, if somebody went away, you're going to hear from them when you hear from them. They're going to either call you on the telephone or you're going to get a letter. I mean, it was just, is what it is. So the family didn't suspect anything at all.
No. Well, Reet had been expected by her elder brother, Tonu, his wife, Tiu, and their maternal grandmother, Joanna Patz, at Tonu's home in Scottsdale, Arizona, for a visit in 1969. So Gilda happened to run into Jean a few months later in spring 1970, who Reet and Jean stayed with for 2 weeks. She asked him about Reet, and he told her that Reet went off on her own after 2 weeks, and that her boyfriend Jean stayed in LA. He had no idea where she was going.
She was only there for 2 weeks, so it's not certain as to whether she was going to Arizona to her brother's place. Like if that was her final destination, going to see her brother, but going through California to see Jean. According to apartment owner Jean, she left on her own, and her boyfriend Jean stayed in Los Angeles. So that's it's weird and it's not clear. I don't think that fact's ever going to be clear until police can talk to Jean or Jean.
Yeah. So, a woman's body was found on November 16th, 1969. Despite attempts to identify her through a police sketch, nobody claimed her body. She would be known as Jane Doe number 59 because she was found without identification and her family did not report her missing.
No, because again, they had no reason to suspect. If they didn't hear from her for a little while, they would be thinking, I wonder, what she's doing. But I don't know if they would be terribly worried.
Well, I think
after a certain amount of time, I think her family trusted her too.
Yeah. Well, if she had that kind of eccentric spirit that people liked, they probably just assumed that nobody would have any reason to do anything malicious to her.
Yeah, and it was 1969. That was a year of a lot of this. The hippie movement was big, Summer of Love, and the young people were just moving all over and living where they wanted to live, and so I think it was just a vibe at the time. So, I don't know if any of that is going to be totally clear what happened. Personally, I don't think she left Los Angeles at all. I don't think she was going to Arizona.
Well, I just wonder if she was expected. Was that the destination that she was going, like you said, passing through LA, or was it that she was in LA and she had contacted them and they got her to come over, or they were expecting her to come over?
Yeah, it's just why would she not leave with her boyfriend? Even if she was going to see her brother, why wouldn't her boyfriend or whatever go with her, or
Yeah, well, maybe even she was with him at that apartment and things didn't go so well once they were living together, maybe, and she just had enough.
Yeah.
Maybe she just decided to leave.
The only thing about that is, why wouldn't she call even her best friend, even if she didn't want to reach out to her mom to worry her? Why wouldn't she call her best friend and say, what, Jean, I just had a fight. He kicked me out, or I'm leaving him. Can you, whatever, wire me money, or do you want to come here and, see me, or I'm almost sure she would reach out to a friend at least to say, this happened. So yeah.
Well, maybe she just had enough and she just wanted to move on. Who knows?
Well, she didn't make it very far.
No. So because Jane Doe number 59 was not reported missing and had no ID, she would be buried in a mass grave with other unidentified bodies from that morgue.
Yeah, which is a mass grave. Unless, I guess, they're unidentified bodies and unclaimed bodies. But if they're part of a crime, you can't exhume the body. Like if she's in a mass grave, that part it's done. No, cold cases aren't dead cases. They're just not going any further than a certain point.
Yeah.
Or there is no way to go any further with it. I mean, it can become warm in like a second with a big lead, or, just a different lead. So they can't totally give up like that.
But I also can't see the police being so disrespectful to just throw them in a pile.
It's Los Angeles, don't forget. Can you imagine the amount of bodies that go through LA in a day? I mean, it's not just one morgue either. There's a lot of morgues, but there's also a lot of bodies. Yeah. And 1969 was a particularly brutal year. Anywhere from, 67 on to 69 Yeah, so I guess they had no choice.
Yeah. Well, it was almost 50 years later that Jane Doe would be identified as Reet Jurvetson.
Yeah, so finally she was identified.
Yeah, it took a long time, but...
Almost 50 years. I think it was 47 years. 46 or 47 years.
Basically 50 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was in June 2015 when Gloria Lalonde, an old friend of Reet, discovered her morgue photo online and recognized her. She was positively identified by DNA results in December 2015.
That's a long time, from 1969 to 2015. Thank goodness they identified her. This friend in particular, it was sort of a friend of the friend that came across the photo, and the photo of Reet is online. I may or may not include it. I don't like to include those kinds of things in the video. I don't want to make anybody feel uneasy, but that photo is also online. It's not bad. But again, it's not for everybody. Obviously, like most crime scene photos or morgue photos, but it is there. So it was Gloria, I believe, that actually contacted Reet's family, and it was Reet's sister, I believe, and said bad news but good news, more or less. I mean, not like that, not in so many words, but and then she said, I think Reet's body's been identified. So,
and that was again after 50 years of not knowing what happened to their daughter and sister, like,
yeah,
just suddenly hearing that, because I mean, again, there was no internet at the time, so now that this information was, I don't know how the friend came across it, but would probably never have found out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, being already 50 years had gone by with nothing, so...
And I would guess then, if they didn't know about Jane Doe 59, then they would have had still no idea that she had even died or anything even happened to her.
Yeah, I think it took a while. Like, technology changed a lot in the 90s on, and then in the 2000s, of course, it went nuts. So I think it took a long time to get through all of the old cold cases and enter them into databases, and so like a number of years had already gone by with the nothing for technology or identification tools that they have now.
And DNA especially has helped a lot with cold cases since it was the 90s, early 90s?
Yeah, I believe 1993. So even that, between 69 and say 93ish, that's quite the gap of of nothing, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she was identified. So Reet was stabbed 150 times, and her body was found by a 15-year-old birdwatcher tangled in the bushes near Mulholland Drive and Skyline Drive in Los Angeles. This is very near to another famous crime scene that we've talked about. I mentioned it earlier, the Tate LaBianca murders committed by the Manson family, also in 1969. And this is going to come into play a little bit later. So this 15-year-old birdwatcher, thank goodness that he found her, but also whoever disposed of her body, I think it was a very, very deep canyon, and I think what they thought is she was going to go to the very bottom, never to be seen again. And actually, the way she was thrown down, her body got caught in a tree, so she was just a mere maybe 20 feet to 30 feet down in the canyon. So yeah, really backfired on whoever did that. I think eventually somebody else may have found her, just the way that she fell. It was almost sort of, I mean, terrible that it happened, but it was almost, thank goodness that she fell like that she got caught up in those trees and spotted. So according to the coroner's report, she had been passed on for 2 days before her body was found. And when she had passed away, that was 48 hours after her last meal. So they can do that. I mean, of course, I guess you guys already know about how they do autopsies and whatnot. So according to what was in her stomach and where it was in her system, she hadn't eaten for 2 days before she passed. So that's strange. Where was she having not have eaten for 2 days before? She must have been, and this will be brought up a little bit later as well, she must have been somewhere where somebody held her captive or didn't let her eat and drink, basically, for 2 days. Yeah. Torture.
Yeah, it could have been a case of that, and then once they had done what they had done, maybe they just took her and tried to dump her. And you would think that either of the Jeans would know something, because the very next year, well, that was what, November 69 when the body was found?
Yeah.
So by, I think it was June 1970 when her friend ran into Jean, and he had said that she left. You would think he would know something, or at least remember, because that was just the year after. Not even a year.
Yeah, but who's to say he didn't have something to do with that?
Well, exactly.
So, I mean, if he's not saying anything, like he's sort of wiping his hands clean of it, maybe he's not guilty, but it seems to me he's kind of being nonchalant with it. It's hard to judge either way what he was getting at there. He's sort of fluffing it off, saying, yeah, I have no idea. She left. She was here for 2 weeks. But also, he's saying a lot by saying very little, I think.
I could almost see it being like, just because he said that she left, perhaps it was the fact that maybe she wanted to leave and he had a problem with that, and then in the heat of passion, murdering her, and then they just had to dispose of the body. I just feel like because that was what he said she did, and then he decided to stay, I just kind of get that. Get that vibe from it.
But then maybe it wasn't them at all. That's what I mean. It's a very hard case because a lot of years have gone by, and there's just nobody saying anything. She was not robbed, as she was found with jewelry on her body, in particular 2 rings, which I have a picture of. Alrighty. So it is 1969, like I mentioned, brutal year in particular, because of the proximity to the Manson murders, the timing, and the manner in which way the murder was conducted. It is suspected that Reet may have met her fate at the hands of the Manson family. So she was stabbed more than 150 times in a rage-killing manner. And that is the way the coroner explained it. So, which was just... Basically, the Tate LaBianca murders were the same thing. Rage-killing manner, stabbing.
It's almost like would be ecstatic or like a psychotic, you could say.
Yeah, so anybody who's interested in that sort of thing, that close contact, especially stabbing, especially this many times, there's a lot of passion behind it.
Yeah.
A lot of anger, a lot of something behind it. So somebody was very, very angry with her. The Manson family, that's basically what they did. They were it was rage killing. So they're thinking maybe it had something to do with the Manson family. And it was in exactly the same area, just about a month or 2 months apart. Yeah.
Maybe it was even a case of, I don't know if it would have been the same night, or I don't know if that worked out with the evidence and the dates, but it could have been even they were just, the Manson followers were out on the prowl, or they had maybe just committed a crime and then they were in the zone and they just kind of caught her on the side of the road even. And
yeah, there was something about them, like the Manson family themselves, not even really Charles Manson. Charles Manson at that time he was the advisor, but also he was basically the driver.
Yeah.
He would drop a few of them off at this house, a few of them off at that house. Okay, go do your thing. I have no idea what you're doing. I'm just the driver. I don't know why I took you to this address and you don't know me and I don't know you. And that was his thing.
Yeah.
So, the Manson family themselves were just so spun out on drugs and so full of rage and brainwashed. You never know. Reet was in this area. She could have just, like, it could have been just the wrong place at the wrong time. Or, maybe she ran into the Manson family or Charles himself and decided to move out to Spawn Ranch and live with them. Maybe things went sour there. I mean, Charles Manson was a big deal.
It was a big name in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly, well, to a certain extent, it attracted a lot of young people at the time whose ideas were very different from their parents, especially.
Yeah, so. And he was, and especially in Los Angeles, like, he was known on the streets and in the hippie neighborhoods and stuff. They knew Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And women really liked him. Maybe she just got caught up in the moment. And then something went wrong there. Actually, a member of the Manson family, and she was another Canadian, claimed to know her or at least have seen her before. That's all she said. She didn't say where she saw her, but she was shown a sketch of the found body because she was found in that same area. And she said that she knew her. Charles Manson was questioned about this case, and he claimed no responsibility and had no information to offer. So that's what he does.
Yeah,
that's what we were just saying. He's the hands-off guy.
Yeah.
Although he had nothing to lose, he was already in prison for the rest of his life. But maybe he just didn't know her.
Even keeping his mouth shut, he didn't really keep himself out of trouble. I mean, he got life sentences.
The thing with Charles Manson is he was the leader of the family. He incited a lot of stuff. Apparently, he only killed one person in his whole life, which might be true. He was also getting a big influence over a big number of people. So anytime somebody, especially in those times, and I guess to a certain extent today, as soon as somebody who comes out of nowhere gets a big following, it becomes a big deal with certain people, like authority figures, government, whatever, politicians. So I think that's also where Charles Manson was going to be in a little bit of trouble. I think they wanted to put him away. He was having way too much of a say. And it was probably best that they did put him away. But I think that had a lot to do with it too. He was becoming kind of powerful, and that hippie generation could be swayed here, there, and everywhere because they were all, it was drugs.
Yeah.
It was drugs. And they looked at him as though he were a prophet.
In a time when they were still, I say still, but they were, I guess, after rebuilding after World War II, and then they were concerned about the future of their country, and then you got all these kids, consuming all these drugs and following these different leaders. It would be definitely troublesome to the establishments and the government.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see it time and time again, especially in the 60s. There were men and women, mostly men at the time, who were sort of leading big groups of people, either right or wrong, and a lot of them met an early fate because of that. And there's just something to be said for it.
Yeah, there's obviously something in these...
Like John Lennon, I think the same thing. He had a power over the people, not in a bad way. It's not like that. He's not a magician, but I mean, people loved him so much. I think the government was definitely threatened by him, especially, what's his name, Nixon, had a big problem with John Lennon. Anyway, we're straying. But yes, maybe she did come across the Manson family. It's definitely their style.
Yeah.
Reet, looked a lot like Sharontate. She was very, very beautiful. I don't know if maybe that was an attraction for Charles, or, who knows? But there's a big possibility that the Manson family is involved. The next suspects are Jean, the boyfriend, and Jean, the friend of the boyfriend. So, and that's a whole other side. Like,
yeah, what happened to those two?
They're Jean, the friend, not boyfriend, friend, was seen once after. And then basically these fellas just disappeared. So nothing from them.
Nobody knew their full names or anything to identify them.
No, nobody knows. It's very, very strange. Like, nobody seems to know them. Even to this day, nobody knows them. And their pictures have been put out there, and, like, sort of updated versions, like what they would look like today, 50 plus years later, whatever.
Yeah.
Nobody knows them. It's like there's no family, no other friends. They didn't move on and get married. Like, nobody knows them. Another theory is that possibly he lured her to Los Angeles and he was involved in the sex trade.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's why she tried to escape and then she got murdered.
Yeah, maybe she was going to blow the whistle. Like, we don't know there for sure.
Yeah.
But there's also that theory as well. Because there was a lot of travel by Jean between Los Angeles and Montreal. So it's quite possible. Mm. And she's very beautiful as well. In 2017, and in cooperation with the Los Angeles Police Department, a news broadcasting corporation commissioned sketches of Jean and Jean. So I do have those sketches. I will put them right here. And that's it, pretty much.
There is.
The friend of Reet, remember Jean, number 1. So Jean, number 1, is going to be Jean, the apartment owner, friend of Jean. He was short, 5'6" range. He had black hair, blue eyes, and a French accent, of course. So, sort of your average Quebecer, your average Frenchman, I'd say, French-Canadian.
It sounds like it.
Jean, number 2, he's the one that looks like Jim Morrison. He was described as being more than 5'9" in height, with brown eyes and long hair feathered back. And that was in 1969. He looked like that. So he's not going to look like that now, but no. He did look like that then. So I think police are hoping, do you guys know this person that looks like Jim Morrison? I know there was probably a lot of guys back then that looked like Jim Morrison, though.
I was going to say, with the description of what they look like, it would be kind of hard to pick them out of a crowd.
Yeah.
Or a lineup of men.
Yeah, 1969. Yeah.
That wasn't that much variety, I guess, of looks.
No, I mean, I bet it was a popular look. Women like Jim Morrison. Did either of the Jeans know the Manson family? So another theory intertwines the Jeans with the Manson family, because the Jean who was living, friend of Jean, who was living in Los Angeles at the time, was just in the right area, hung around just the right places to possibly run into Charles Manson. Because Charles Manson, like I said, was known on particular streets. So did the Jeans know Charles Manson? And is that a whole thing? So both theories stuck together. And quite possible.
Yeah. It would sound like it would make sense, that's for sure.
So as I said, not much is known about Jean and Jean. They're basically ghosts right now. They could be actual ghosts too, I don't know. Los Angeles Police Department and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are hoping anyone who may know either Jean to come forward with any leads. It was last known that Reet's boyfriend Jean stayed back in Los Angeles, and their roommate Jean made his way back to Montreal at one point, at least.
You'd think there'd be other women who came across as Jean at the time, too, right? She just met him in a cafe, and maybe he could have been in a cafe somewhere else, or still in Montreal.
Somebody knows something. They were talking to a woman who, when first the theory came out about the Manson family, and they were talking to a few ladies who they hung around the Haight-Ashbury district. And there were other cases in the canyon of murdered women at the time. And the list goes on and on. And it was around the 1968 to 1970, 71 time. And this woman said, you know what, there was a lot of drugs back then. You're going to be hard-pressed to find someone that's going to remember such details.
Yeah, true.
So that's another roadblock, I guess. And I mean, it sounds funny, but actually kind of true, too.
Yeah. I guess there's just going to be a lot of people with
foggy memory.
Yeah.
The apartment building in Los Angeles, Reet's last known residence, was torn down in 1989. The owner of the building passed away in 2015. His tenant records from that property have never been found. So that doesn't help.
No. Especially not still after 50 years later.
Well, it was discovered recently, and I don't know exactly how it was discovered. I think it was just sort of a random event. In 1969, a person named M. Lindhorst lived in apartment 305, directly across the hallway from the unit Reet, Jean, and Jean stayed in. It is not clear if M. Lindhorst is a man or woman, or if they're even still alive. They're not considered a suspect, but it would help if they could be questioned as a witness. Like, this is, so many years have gone by. This is basically the only other name that they have from that building.
Well, I wonder how they got that too, even.
So I think maybe it was a family member of M. Lindhorst that maybe they had a letter or, a family member, and it had this particular address of this building on it. Because this apartment building was actually on a chunk of Paramount Studios.
Oh, okay.
So it was like a really cool apartment building. I think that's even why it was torn down in 1989, just to expand the studios. Wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, so that, I guess they're hoping that somebody knows M. Lindhorst that lived in that apartment, or they're trying to get a hold of M. Lindhorst to talk to them. So many years have gone by. Most unlikely, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if it was going to happen, it would have happened.
I wonder how that even took so long to find that out, though. Like, did they not, even in Oh, no, you know what? Yeah, I guess if they didn't identify the body till 50 years later, so they wouldn't have been able to pinpoint that apartment building or anything.
No, by the time they identified her body, so many people had either, come and gone or passed on, or just sort of you forget over the years. Yeah. This could have been maybe a bank, a government institution that happened to have this address on file with this name. And that's why they have the name and the address, but they can't say anything further about it. Could have been a utilities company. Like, this could have come from anywhere.
Yeah.
But apparently this person, they can't find this person either. And all they want to do is question them. But, that's a lot of years to go by. Almost 50 years.
Yeah.
If this M. Lindhorst was already, in their 30s or 40s or 50s at the time.
By now, yeah.
Yeah, chances are we're not going to talk to them. The LAPD's public appeal for anyone who lived in or worked in the apartment building to step forward, no one has. So They were looking for contractors. They were looking for just anybody who was in that building, worked on that building, worked in that building, just to come forward. Does anybody know anything? There was absolutely zero, and that must be super frustrating. I mean, this case could just stay cold unless they find Jean, or like they need a big lead. It has to be huge. Fortunate, at least she was identified. That was a big step in the right direction. It's just going on from here, pretty much. And there's really nothing new on this case either, but I still thought it was a very, very important case to bring to your attention. It comes in waves. It's sort of, they get a fair bit of a lead, and then it goes nowhere. But I mean, it's dwindling down to nothing, and you really hate to see that. A lot of Reet's family aren't with us anymore either, so it's also sad to see that generations are going on and we still don't have any justice for her. Many, many theories, but like I said, unless they get to talk to Jean, I think this case is probably done.
Yep. There's probably not much more they can do. Like I said, after 50 years and still nothing.
Yeah.
It's kind of past the point of no return, so to speak.
It's too bad that somebody didn't see that picture, before. But anyway, if anything's going to come out of this case, just thank goodness that her family knew what happened to her. Unfortunately, what happened to her, but at least they knew where she was, because they just didn't know anything.
Yeah, small bit of closure, but...
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate that, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.